Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode looking at times we are living in currently. I hope you're doing well and taking utmost care and precaution. This time we have someone who is trying to do his part to ease the situation to a certain degree. Thank you so much for doing this, Aman, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. This is amazing. Looking forward to it.
All right, so before beginning, I want you to tell the people listening who is Aman Jori.
Okay, that's a a little bit of a complicated question, but
Mm-hmm.
allow me to take a little bit of time to explain. I'm 26
Sure.
years old. I'm an entrepreneur. Basically, my primary job is that of a weapons developer. I started a company about 6, 7 years ago that does weapon technology. We build artificial intelligence and next gen stuff for the forces. We develop it, design it, manufacture it, test it, and sell it to our Indian forces, and that's my primary business. Aside from that, I just finished my master's last year in astronautics from Purdue University,
Mm-hmm.
and I was one of the fortunate ones to work on NASA projects and spacecrafts. But I decided, my talents are best utilized in India, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to work for an organization that does not actively help my country develop. So that's why I decided to come back to India and continue my profession here. I'm also a helicopter pilot,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very soon going to be certified to train in aerial firefighting and more missions like these, mostly rescue missions. So that's what I do aside from my regular job. Of late, I have started supplying oxygen in cans, in portable
Mm-hmm.
cans, to patients in need, because India is going through a very horrible and a terrible
Yep. Yep.
oxygen crisis at the moment. And I thought, if I have oxygen available, since I'm an aviation company anyway, might as well, put it to good use and start getting it supplied to everyone else around in the country at least. So yeah, that's I guess I think I've covered most of these things. And of course, yes, in other
Mm-hmm.
parts of my profession, I get to work with the government officials and I help them build policies from Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Civil Aviation, and other government bodies. But that's kind of the last
Mm-hmm.
priority, because that kind of stuff takes time, and I think there are people in the world who are far better at that than me. So yeah, that's what I do.
All right, all right. So, just a cliche question. What is your motivation in, building the oxygen can? How, like, I know it's patriotism and all, but what was the initial motivation?
So the story is actually like pretty simple. That
Mm-hmm.
last year my grandfather was going through COVID himself, and his
Mm-hmm.
saturation dropped to below 70, and we weren't getting beds or cylinders. And I thought, what could I do? So, and I was in office that time, and it struck to
Mm-hmm.
me that I have an oxygen cylinder in office right here. Except that medical grade oxygen is always liquefied; it's never gaseous oxygen. I mean, it passes through a water tube,
Mm-hmm.
and I had gaseous oxygen. But I said, you know what, I can if I can connect a mask and a regulator on top. So I did figure out the regulator part in maybe 20 minutes of staring at that cylinder. That I could fit a regulator, fit a mask on it, and all of that was great. But when I actually started to move a cylinder, because it was a heavy 50-liter cylinder, when I started to move it, I decided, I realized I couldn't move it because it's
Mm-hmm.
way too heavy for one person to carry, and there was no one else in office at that time. So I thought, screw it. I've got a deodorant can. I had one of these deodorant cans. I built a sort of a makeshift adapter in office. I got it transferred to the deo can, and I took that deo can over to my grandfather. And basically, I had him inhale that oxygen for a while, and it boosted his saturation level. Of course, that was a
Mm-hmm.
waste of a concept because I could barely get maybe 10 inhalations in that little can.
Mm-hmm.
But it helped them. It helped them in the day. And over the next few days, that's what I did. I used to go to office. I used to take a couple of cans, fill up that oxygen, take it to him. And then when eventually I realized that it's not just about my grandfather. There are a lot of people who need this, who can benefit from it. So I started to build something around it. There were already competitors in the market who were doing this. It's not a new concept. I mean, it's there for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Except I realized the challenge that most other companies use aluminum as as the material for a can, which means, and a particular grade of aluminum less than 2 thou thickness, which means
Mm-hmm.
that it can't sustain heavy pressures, and gas is always measured in pressure and not in volume. So if it cannot sustain that kind of pressure, it cannot contain that kind of volume as well. Which means you either raise the temperature of the gas, which can result in the can itself exploding,
Mm-hmm.
or you reduce the pressure, in which that's what most companies do. That's why their products don't give you more than 100 inhalations, which is barely going to last you a day. And
Hmm.
that's when that struck me that, okay, what if I can develop a material, get it to its strength limits, do so. Basically, I spent 3 months doing R&D testing, doing CFD analysis, running it through simulation softwares to get the right kind of thickness for the material that I'm choosing. The material has to be widely available and not expensive, because the material starts getting expensive, it's going to create a burden on the customer eventually.
Yep. Yep.
So I spent a lot of time building that, and then maybe a couple of months in the lab where I think I almost burst 50 cans in my own hand trying to
Mm-hmm.
get the right kind of pressure, because I was measuring with a micro stopwatch as well as a
Uh-huh.
pressure regulator, a PSI measuring regulator. And eventually I found the right pressure, I found the right volume, I found the right temperature, something that can exist on in room temperature without getting overheated. So I did solve the pressure problem, I solved the time problem, I solved the can dimension problem.
Mm-hmm.
One problem that took me still a while to solve was the heating, because as you pressurize a gas more and more, the temperature
Mm-hmm.
shoots up. Temperature is directly proportional to pressure,
All right.
and pressure used to reach almost 55-60 degrees Celsius. The can was too hot to hold in your hand.
Yep.
So it took me some time to solve the temperature problem also. But once I finally did it, I said, okay, I'm not going to throw it out in the market just like that.
Mm-hmm.
I need a regulatory body to give me support. So I
Yeah.
applied to
Yeah.
the FDA. The FDA guys came over, the inspectors did a thorough inspection, and I had to make a lot of changes in my lab, because regulation dictates that you need minimum of 200 square feet of manufacturing facility. So I had to build
Mm-hmm.
that up, and there was a lot of kinks involved in the process. It's a 9-11 month long process actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
And finally I said, okay, now it's time to roll in the market. It was already out in the market by November, but
Oh.
there wasn't an oxygen shortage then. The oxygen shortage
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
started like a month ago. So it picked up in a month, and suddenly the video I make goes viral. It's got more than 140K views on
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, and more than 30-40,000 other views on Facebook. And it's got a lot of comments, and that's where the orders started. I'm processing almost 800 plus orders a day, making sure the oxygen reaches in all parts of the country. And
Mm-hmm.
it's been great. I mean, I'm really getting a chance to help people, which has been the best part about all of this. That I've
Mm-hmm.
got an opportunity to serve the country and do some good, which makes all the difference in the world.
All right. I have a couple of questions here. Like, how did you
Yeah.
solve the heating problem?
Okay, so basically, what I realized was that you could either reduce the pressure or you could reduce the speed at which you fill the gas.
Uh-huh. Hmm.
By reducing the pressure, I would reduce the number of inhalations, which means that um, basically the product is not worthwhile then. So that
Mm-hmm.
was not an option. The rate of filling, basically, we call it volumetric per second. So that's the volume of the gas that flows from the mother cylinder to the smaller can per
Hmm.
second. And I was able to get it somewhere around 11 to 12 cans in a second.
Okay.
But
Hmm.
then sorry, I said it wrong. I mean 1 can in 11 seconds. That's what I
Acha.
mean.
Okay. Hmm.
11 seconds per can. Yeah, that's the right word.
Mm-hmm.
So I spend my time working around that to increase that time so that I can meet my production criteria, which is about 3,000 cans a day, as well
Mm-hmm.
as not cause a lot of heat in the can. So eventually, what I realized is that instead of suddenly bursting that amount of oxygen in a smaller can, which causes it to increase in dimension and increase the temperature, I could put a regulator in middle which could pass the gas through 4 different channels.
Mm-hmm.
As the oxygen reaches through channel 1 and channel 2, it increases the pressure, and channel 3 and channel 4 will reduce the pressure, which means the delta that is created between the two channels, which is barely 2 or 3 psi, but that is enough for me to lower the temperature suddenly.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
if the gas is entering at, let's say, 32 degrees Celsius, by the time it reaches my can, the delta in the temperature makes sure that it is less than 30 degrees Celsius.
All
So
right.
if the
Hmm.
gas entering in the can itself is cold, the temperature difference that I get when it shoots up is actually room temperature. So that solved the problem for me.
Interesting. All right. It would take me a lot of time to process that, but yeah. The other thing is like, how is the process with the DFDA guys? Like, if someone else wants to start this again, like something similar, like, what's the
Yeah.
process?
Oh, it's a very. I mean, honestly, after they've been very sweet. They've been so supportive. But I have to say this that it's a very long process. It
Hmm.
is something that genuinely takes time and effort. And Okay, I can say this to you. The process, the basically, when it came to manufacturing and safety and all of that, I was authorized in a single day.
Oh.
The technical part didn't take me even one day to get it authorized. Firstly, I already have almost 26 licenses because of the aerospace work that I do. That includes the pollution control board. That includes most other aviation grade oxygen suppliers. That includes safety limits, that includes fire hazard. So I already have that in place. If you're asking me that, how easy it is to start a facility like this, firstly, I have the background in aviation with which it is easy for me to do oxygen work. So if you're asking me that time, that took 12 years. So I
All right.
mean that genuinely that much time that it takes to build this kind of licensing. When it came to the FDA, they focused on these tinier details. Like they said, you need the regulation says that there must be separate changing room for ladies. And I've never had that problem because I've never had ladies work for me in this field. This is a very labor intensive field. But the regulation says it, and I respect it. And I said, okay, you know what? going to get to it right away. So it took about 3 or 4 weeks to build a separate changing room. Then they said, we need proper records. All the cupboards you have need to be fireproof. The handles need to be fireproof so that in case there is a accident at your facility, your records don't burn away. So it took time to change the wood on those cupboards and doors and the handles, and basically labeling everything and making sure that bulk storage and oxygen storage each has its own safety features. So that those little things about changing the facility took me almost 4 months to get underway. And it happened because I already have an aviation background. If someone who's not from the aviation company or has never inherently dealt with oxygen, it will take them a minimum of 3 or 4 years to start something off the ground.
All right.
Because you have to understand how pressure works, how temperature works, and what are the little nitty-gritties of working with oxygen. For example, there's something called hypoxia, there's oxygen toxicity, that it does affect your workers as well. So to understand all of these things, of course, it's been more than a decade for us doing oxygen work, so it was easier. But for someone who's not in this field, it's going to take them much, much longer.
All right. Like, how many guys did you hire for this?
But zero actually. I'm currently using my own strength of people that I have. We do something called HST, which stands for hydrostatic testing. We've been doing that for 12 years. We're the only company in India which does that for the airlines and defense forces. Basically, all that oxygen that is carried on an aircraft, that is two primary cylinders, that is two primary supplies that also go into the engine, that goes into the APU, that goes into the cabin. That includes one cylinder for every emergency mask that is deployed on a seat in case of an emergency of an aircraft. And some of the cylinders that go with the escape slides as well, because an escape slide has to inflate within less than 4 seconds. So all of that cylinder work when it comes to noble gases, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, helium, neon, argon, oxygen, all of that work has been done by us for 12 years in India now. So, and so which means I have trained and qualified manpower when it comes to technicians, engineers, officers, quality control, management, people who already know how this works. So it honestly didn't take me a lot of manpower to get it done. Of course, it did take me a lot of R&D, because you need to spend time in knowing what kind of adapters fit best for you, how to create a setup and a system. The machine that I built that does this automated job of filling oxygen itself took me 6 months to design and build, to manufacture. Now, frankly, it's a single touch operation. You can, one touch of the button on the machine, and it fills the can up with oxygen up to the safe limits, and it's ready for deployment. So, but that process itself took about 6 to 8 months.
All right. That means you had like your team previously helping you out with all this, right?
Yeah, of course, I had qualified manpower, and experienced manpower more than anything else.
Like, what is the biggest challenge you faced in this? Like, what is that one problem you're still not able to fix, like while delivering oxygen
Yeah, I have
manufacturing?
bitched about this to everyone, and I'm going to bitch about this to you as well.
Sure.
I don't think I am fighting an oxygen crisis anymore. I think I was fighting an oxygen crisis last year. This year, I think I'm fighting a bureaucratic crisis more than anything else. I'm fighting a crisis of perspective. I'm fighting a crisis of trust and faith. The state governments have taken control of most oxygen banks and supplies in the country. You no longer have independent oxygen suppliers in India anymore. All of it has been seized by the police and the state government, which means if someone needs oxygen right now, it is such a long, drawn out bureaucratic process that by the time I'm able to deliver, the patient has died already. and it is very difficult to kind of combat this bureaucratic, because I'm just one guy. In the larger grander scheme of things, I'm a very tiny, small, ineffective, inconsequential person trying to help and going against an entire establishment. And I don't mean Maharashtra state or central government. I'm not naming any governments here. I'm just meaning the whole of the governance structure of India. It's in shambles at the moment, and if only they could focus on making that process simpler, we could just change things within a week. It won't take us more than a week for us to reverse this crisis on itself. Dr. Harshavardhan, who is the Union Health Minister of India, says that we've got sufficient oxygen supply to last us a month and 2 months, and I believe in him. I say yes, I agree that we have sufficient oxygen in India. The problem is that the same oxygen is not able to reach the people when it really has to. It's sitting in oxygen banks when police are taking 7-8 days to verify documents, and which is a good thing. I say, you know what, it's going to discourage black marketers, it's going to help arrest criminals and all of that. But in the lieu of all of this, the person who gets hurt the most is the patient, someone in critical condition. And of course, a patient who cannot afford or who does not have political contacts or who cannot pull strings to get oxygen for himself or herself, they're the ones who are the worst hit. If you're an MLA's son, or your friend is a politician or a businessman, for you to arrange oxygen is maybe a matter of 2 or 3 phone calls. But for someone who can't do this, which is almost more than 92% of India, who can't afford this, who cannot, who are already dying of COVID, for them to arrange a cylinder for themselves is a mess. I mean, it will take them at least 15 days before someone picks up their phone, which is, I think, the worst crisis that this country is facing, and I'm facing personally, because as one person, I can only help so many people at one time. I definitely cannot talk to more than 5 people. I have done that, by the way. I have had 3 phones to my ear, 2 on speaker and 1 on Zoom. And I've tried to manage all of that together, trying to arrange oxygen beds, ventilators for everyone. And that's the limit of my personal capacity as well. I mean, and like me, I know there are many people like me, trying to help and all that. But unless the system changes, unless the establishment tries to modify itself, tries to understand the ground reality, not a lot is going to change. And we're going to get drawn out into this crisis further. I mean, we are importing crores worth of oxygen from Germany, which is great, but is it actually going to reach the people? And that is something that I'm really doubtful about. So that's the worst kind of battle I'm fighting, honestly.
Alright, so like you mean like the government is actually causing the problem while delivering the oxygen? The oxygen crisis actually does not exist, but exists because of the bad policies of the government. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, it's just ineffective. And it's not just that. When I tell you that I'm fighting a crisis of trust and faith, it's the same thing that a politician, and I can name so many on this podcast, I just don't want you to fall into trouble, so I'm not going to. But so many people I know who are hoarding cylinders for no reason. What is the point of having one COVID patient in your house and keeping 15 goddamn 10-liter cylinders in your house? Like that, those 15 cylinders will last you at least 6 months. And what is the point? I mean, and that's not even a serious case. I'm talking about the mild COVID cases. Some businessmen, politicians are hoarding it just for the sake of emergency. They might need 5 cylinders. Now, you have to realize that every cylinder that you hoard or you keep more than you need, whether it's a bed, whether it's a ventilator, whether it's a concentrator, a regulator, or a BiPAP machine, everything that you hoard is a valuable resource that is not available to someone who really needs it. Which is the real crisis. I mean, it's not that we are suddenly out of oxygen. INOX supports, almost close to 130 kiloliters of oxygen a day. They can easily meet the demand, but the problem is that the supply is not effective. It's not efficient, and that's the biggest crisis we are facing.
What do you think is the solution to this?
Well, I mean, honestly, I've seen more governance. I have seen much better organization in the hands of these, people like you, people like 16, 17, 18-year-olds who are doing such amazing work, on Instagram and Facebook. And my heart warms up to see things like these. When the youth of this country decides to come together and, deploy simple technology like Google Sheets, Google Docs, and, make detailed Instagram posts about what is verified and what is not. To the tune where literally every minute these lists are getting updated. These lists are coming into picture of what is verified, what is not verified, at what timestamp. And I love this. I love that,
Hmm.
people like of your age, people, well, some of my age as well, most of them are busy fighting COVID in their own families.
Hmm.
But the young people are responsible, are taking positive action, and are actually able to help. And I love this. It's a collective movement against the establishment. And I'm not saying in the way that, we want to kick the establishment out, in a way
Hmm.
that the establishment is not able to do its job, and we are able to do that job despite them, not with them but despite them. And I think that's a big step forward. The simple solution, I mean, of course there is no simple solution, and I
Hmm.
take my words back. It's
Yeah.
as complicated a situation as it is. To understand the ground reality, the same people who make these policies have to visit these COVID centers, have to visit COVID facilities. You have to talk to people on the ground to understand what the problem is. A few consignments of mine were being shipped from Delhi to Faridabad, and
Hmm.
these people got stopped at gunpoint in Faridabad. These goons snatched away the oxygen, and they started selling it on the black market. That's the reality. And unless the state police, the state government, the IS officials, the administration, they don't
Hmm.
meet us at ground level and start talking to the people who are really impacted, they're not going to understand how their policies help. So I think that's one step forward.
Interesting. All right. All right. So, what can people like us who are not affected by COVID do to help this situation, other than quarantining? Like, what are the things that we can do to help, actually help, other than
I mean,
awareness?
honestly, I was just speaking to a US based group,
Mm-hmm.
and US and Canada based group of students who were away from India, Indian students,
Mm-hmm.
whose families were either impacted or not impacted by COVID, and they were looking to help. They were looking to spend funds. So I said,
Mm-hmm.
okay, if you want to do that, then I can give you a few pain point areas where you can target. And the reason I'm telling you this is because if I wasn't working on the oxygen can thing, that's what I would have been focusing on.
Mm-hmm.
Is that firstly, people need equipment.
Yeah.
People need portable oxygen concentrators, POCs, because POCs are the only kind of concentrators allowed on flights.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm going to start airlifting people, if I'm going to rescue, do medevac rescues, and people are going to travel in an aircraft, they
Mm-hmm.
would need these POCs. Big cylinders don't work.
Hmm.
So what I was suggesting is, you can collect funds to start spending on this kind of thing, spending on regulators. Cylinders are available, but regulators are not available. And if regulators are available, then their masks are not available. So, spend money on equipment, start procuring. And I don't mean one or two BiPAP machines or
Hmm.
concentrators. I mean in bulk. I mean 100, 200 at a time, maybe 1,000, 2,000 at a time, that you can generate money and buy and procure from other countries.
Hmm.
If it's not available in India, from China, from Taiwan, from whatever is cheaper for you, whatever is more easily accessible, and
Hmm.
then
Hmm.
create a system, create an infra where this thing reaches the patient directly. There is no middleman involved in this scenario. You're not giving this, donating this to an organization, you're not donating this to an NGO or a charity. You are saying, okay, as a group of people, we take the responsibility of a small town.
Hmm.
For example,
Hmm.
10 people take the responsibility of Gorakhpur,
Hmm.
and there are well over 8,000 cases in Gorakhpur. So you say, okay, whoever needs a BiPAP, a concentrator, a cylinder, we'll provide for Gorakhpur at this rate. And you don't talk to the municipality, you don't talk to the police in Gorakhpur, you don't talk to anyone. You reach
Hmm.
directly to the patient. Now you can understand that I'm giving you a very, very complicated problem to solve, because
Hmm.
how
Hmm.
would you reach the patient in the first place? What is the best way to go about it? And most people don't have smartphones, but that's the challenge. If it was easy, anyone would do it and everyone would do it.
Yep.
So that's what I keep suggesting, that don't focus on the tier 1, tier 2 towns. Stop focusing on Mumbai, Delhi, Chennai, Kolkata, because firstly, people have enough economic capital to afford their own beds.
Mm-hmm.
And the municipality in these cities is rich enough to support this, bankroll this in the first place.
Hmm.
So the idea is that you should reach out to tier 2, tier 3 towns where people really need help. There are independent doctors and nurses who have started their own COVID beds.
Hmm.
They've converted the verandas in their houses as COVID beds, and I've received so many heartwarming stories of events like these. So that's one thing that I tell people to help about. If you have the time and if you can, then that's what you should help out. Start reaching out to these villages and start creating an infrastructure where you can provide these in record breaking time. I don't mean you provide this in 20 days, 30 days, but if you can provide something now, that would be great. And of course,
Interesting.
one
Hmm.
big problem that I don't think is a solution that can come from one brain or two brains. I think it needs a lot of teamwork.
Hmm.
Is that all the tier 1 towns in India have lost space for cremation. We are out of
Yep. Yep.
cremation grounds. We are piling up bodies together to burn them. And I've personally visited so many of them. It's a horrifying scene. So if you could, put your brains together and find a solution to the cremating problem, that would be amazing. I mean, not just the fact that you have to burn those bodies together, but you have to pay respects. You have to do it the right way.
Yep. Yep.
The local priest needs about half an hour per body. So if you can do scheduling for them, if you can arrange pickups and drop facilities, if you can do parking for the vehicles, if you can do all of that and make it a COVID safe place for cremation, find an area, earmark it, speak to the government, that would be amazing. I mean, that's a problem that young people can solve because they're dynamic, they do out of the box thinking. So that's whenever someone asks me, that's honestly what I suggest.
All right. All right. What do you think people are doing wrong at this stage?
I mean, firstly, sharing unverified news is 100% incorrect. Playing the blame game is 100% incorrect. I wouldn't say the government is 100% at fault, but they're not at 0% at fault either.
Sure. Sure.
I wouldn't say the same thing about the public. They're not 100% at fault, but they're not at the 0% fault either. It's stopped. I mean, we have to stop trying to blame each other for the problems. That it's more important to start working towards a solution rather than sitting at home. And of course, if you're this goes to say that you should only do this when you have the mental capacity to do it. Some people get exhausted with it very quickly, and in that case, start taking care of yourself first. Self-love above everything else. If you think you're getting mentally drained, if you think it's getting exhausting for you looking at the news every day, stop looking at the news for a few days. It's not going to change the world. It's not going to do anything upside down if you don't watch the news.
Yep.
If it's affecting your mental health, take a day, take a few days, focus on yourself, go off of social media, help yourself, make sure you're fit and fine, and then start working for the people. So I think that's what most people are doing wrong, is that when they start sharing unverified contacts and leads, pick up a phone, dial that number before you share it on Instagram. Actually speak to that person before sharing that number. And then on Instagram say, as of 1st of May, Saturday, 10:15 p.m., this is a verified lead. So, people start believing in you and they develop faith. And I think that's the best way to go forward.
All right. All right. So diverting a bit, like we are even facing a vaccine shortage, right? So do you think this is the same? The reason for this is the same as it is for the auctions?
Oh, no, absolutely not. This is a very, very different problem. It requires a very, very different solution. I think the problem originated, I mean, I wouldn't blame the government because we can't produce that amount of raw material. That amount of raw material to vaccinate 130 crore people has to come from outside. We are not that strong in economy yet. And we don't have that kind of manufacturing infra. So when we say we depended on the US, we depended on France, we depended on Russia and the UK, it made sense, because that's the source you need to meet the demand today. But the US backfired on us, and as of day before yesterday, Ajit Dhaval has taken the reins. He's one of my personal heroes, and I really admire him. He's the national security advisor to the Indian government, to the Prime Minister. And he took charge and he said, I'm going to talk to the US. So he had a phone call with the president and Madam Vice President, and they arranged raw material to be started to ship again. So we have kind of broken that chain so far that, raw materials are not accessible. And of course, both Mr. Poonawalla and Bharat Biotech have now become independent raw material creators. Amazing. We're getting raw material in from China and Russia as well, which is great, which means we are restoring our diplomatic ties with these countries. But that's one thing. The next thing is that people are trying to spread false information that, if a woman is on a period, she can't get a vaccination. That is completely false. It's important that people stop falling prey to these. I really urge every doctor that I speak to, I urge them to come on social media and really talk about the benefits of vaccination. Start talking to people about getting a vaccine as soon as possible. Stop thinking about the side effects. At the moment, it's more important to get a shot first and then start thinking about how it affects your personal life, because we need herd immunity now. Unless we can develop a herd immunity, the deaths are not going to stop. It's only going to start going up. And lockdown is not a solution. Lockdown means that you hurt the economy, you hurt the people. And even if you have a certain bit of economic capital in your life, you can maybe survive another lockdown. But you have to realize that more than 80% of India cannot survive another lockdown. So it's important that everyone gets vaccinated. There needs to be a sense of global empathy when it comes to vaccination. So the more the people are aware, the more they sign up, and shortage is a supply chain problem. It's a macroeconomics problem. It's not a micro problem. So as soon as, we can get stocks in and we start beating that problem, we need people to start signing up and start showing up in large numbers. That's the only way we're going to develop herd immunity.
Like, what do you think about the application procedure that you require for the vaccine? Do you think it's necessary?
Firstly, I think the biggest flaw in that procedure is that one requires a smartphone to do it. And now what I've heard so far is the government has started creating a helpline, where you can call up and just say your name, and you'll get kind of a registration number and all of that. So that's a good thing. But aside from that, I think the fact that you need a smartphone was not a good move. It could have been managed better, designed better in the first place. And yes, that's has been a large problem for any Indian government designed, government backed app, that the servers crash in the first day,
Yep.
as it did. And I was pretty sure, when Coven released, I was very, very sure that it's going to crash in the first day. I didn't sign up immediately because I knew that there's going to be problems. But yeah, that's the idea, that the process is simple, it's smooth, but it needs to be handled in a better way. You can't have one nodal officer per state doing this. You need at least five to coordinate this effort and start getting people vaccinated. So yeah, that's my idea on it.
All right, all right. Like, speaking about the vaccine, the rumors that are spreading, dude, I'm currently living in a village right now, and people here are mad about vaccine. They don't like it, and the main reason for this is social media influencer. Won't name him. Claims that he's a doctor. He got really famous, by the way. You might have definitely heard about him, and he's
Yeah, I know
like,
who you're talking about.
yeah.
Yeah.
Turns out he's not a doctor, and he was an actor before, and he's just doing crap on social media. The thing with this is, like, the point I'm getting at is should we be tolerant about these people? Should we curb their freedom of speech at this stage? Like, what do you think? Should spreading rumors about vaccine be a should be illegal or something on social media?
I mean, firstly, calling it something a criminal offense is a big deal. I mean, it's a big word, and you can't jail people for saying stuff on Instagram. What you can do is you can mark and report them. That's what Instagram community guidelines are. That they give you a reporting and a blocking option for that very same thing. That if more than 500 people report your post, or flag it on Instagram, it's going to be taken down. So there's a democratic process for it anyway. And of course, the best way is for, I mean, I call it an influencer battle, but when one influencer talks crap, the other influencer has to make sense, So there needs to be a sense and balance. And I love the work that these celebrities are doing, especially people with millions of followers. I can name a few, and I would love to name a few. I'm talking about Rashmi Adgekar, I'm talking about S.S. Channa, I'm talking about Ayush Srivastav, about Arnab Kumar, about all these, Shrishti Srivastav, she's a senior of mine from school. All of these celebrities are doing such amazing work on their Instagram. It is just fantastic to see, that they're actively involved in helping people out and are not using this time to promote themselves. And I'm sure a lot of celebrities who are doing that right now. Tanmay Bhatt is one example of someone who's since last year has been really up and about when it comes to charity. And he doesn't say it because, his posts and his stories need to be fun. But I know the kind of work he's doing in the background, and it is just fantastic. So for them, of course, I salute them for the kind of stuff they do. And I think it's a little bit on them also to call these people out on social media to stop spreading crap, especially when it is dangerous and it can cause a risk to society.
Okay. Have you read the Inserter by any chance by Talib?
No, I haven't.
So the point I'm getting at is there's this whole chapter about should we be tolerant about intolerance in this case?
Yes. Okay. I know what you're talking about. That if we are tolerant of intolerance, then we are moving towards sort of a Nazi state, where or a communist kind of a regime or dictatorship, where tolerance itself should not be tolerated in the process of. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I think that's a very long drawn out, sort of a psychological debate when you have to move towards understanding what context in which someone defines intolerance and tolerance. For example, I mean, I'll take you to a very simple path of offense. What is a dark joke to me is offense to someone else. What is a matter of laughter for me can be a very, very offensive thing to someone else. It is so personal that you can't have a universal definition for these concepts. I mean, you can't say that, I'm intolerant about poverty, but I'm going to tolerate economic exploitation. Because both of them go hand in hand, just for the sake of capitalism. If you can say, the minimum labor wage should remain what it is, but I don't accept the below poverty line. Things like these don't work, because these are firstly counter economic subjects, and secondly, they're counterintuitive in the way you discuss them and in the way that you theorize and basically give them a definition. So, well, basically, I think in any democracy, well, none of it is perfect, but you need a platform where everyone can voice their opinion. That
Hmm.
also means tolerating some crap opinions that don't make sense. Because if we start shutting someone else's freedom of speech down in the process of not listening to them, it might hurt someone who is
Hmm.
actually trying to speak up, who's trying to speak up in a matter of a life and death scenario. So in that case, I think for the good of all humanity, I think we should listen, hear everyone out. I mean, and then decide for ourselves whether this person is worth listening to or not.
Hmm. All right. But dude, the problem we're facing here is it's almost like a dilemma, right? Like if we let these people speak, billions are going to die. Like a lot of people are going to die, that's for sure. And natural selection takes time, right? So isn't that sad? Isn't that unfair that because of these people, so many people will die, and we have the chance to stop them right now?
Exactly, but I don't think that's going to stop it because, like, I can give you an example, and I think this will put things into perspective quite a bit.
Hmm.
That just not less than 50 years ago, 60 years ago, we were almost in countries like the Gulf,
Hmm.
women didn't have the right to vote, women couldn't drive, women couldn't own property, and at that time, for that society, that seemed pretty okay, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But fast forward 50, 60 years, now there's a concept of equality, there's concept of feminism, there's concept of gender rights, which
Hmm.
is good for this era. So I think it depends, changes from era to era. What is okay now might not be okay 10 or 15 years later, might not be okay even maybe 100 years later. In Abraham Lincoln's time, slavery was a natural thing, it was a natural
Hmm.
order of things. But now it is, it can't be tolerated by anyone. So I think it matters from generation to generation, time to time. If you look at things happening now on a global scale of maybe a timeline of a few centuries, this is just very inconsequential. This is very
Hmm.
ineffective in its own way. So that's what I think. I mean, it's not the fact that you can simply start shutting people down for what they're saying,
Hmm.
but I think it's a responsibility of the more sensible ones to come out and say these things. For example, one of the most common concepts I can give you is Dr. Fauci versus Donald Trump last year. Now,
Hmm.
Donald Trump was the president of the United States, who is the leader of the free world,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
the kind of stuff he spoke on camera in front of millions of people who pay attention to his every word was just crap,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
You can't take that freedom of speech away from him just because he is talking crap. The more better solution is to have Dr. Fauci, who's a leader of the COVID task force for the world, come up and start stating facts.
Hmm.
So people start. It's a matter of building your own sensibilities into understanding what is right or wrong. But eventually, people also will start understanding, that someone who is authorized and is licensed and experienced to say these things would make more sense than someone who is not. So I guess
Interesting.
that's
Hmm.
what it means in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, I have two questions like follow-ups to this. The first one is, you think there should be an entry barrier for people like who are trying to speak about COVID on social media? Something like a degree or something, or work experience in that field.
Firstly, no, not at all. 100%.
Hmm.
I believe that there should be no barrier of entry here because, very simply put, there are doctors out there who aren't good at public speaking, who
Huh.
aren't good
Hmm.
at convincing people, who aren't good at influencing. They're excellent at their jobs, but this is not a part of their job.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
on the other hand, you have people who are not doctors, who are not nurses, who are not specialists, but who have gone through COVID, who
Hmm.
have
Hmm.
experienced COVID firsthand and have the skills to start delivering their experience on screen, who can,
Hmm.
convince people better with their words. So it's a matter of skill and experience. It has nothing to do with the kind of degree you have.
All
If
right.
you want to speak about COVID and if it is a new experience, if you can explain it better to someone who understands you, then
Hmm.
definitely go for it. I can give you a very simple analogy for this. If you are, let's say, in one of the most remote villages of Maharashtra, if you give
Hmm.
me the top 10 doctors of the world who only speak English,
Hmm. Hmm.
the best people who can, who have worked the most on COVID, but if they can't speak a single word of Marathi, how are they
Hmm.
going to explain to that person what COVID is? Versus someone from their own village who has gone through COVID, who can explain the precautions and what is coming ahead to a person of their own language in a much better way. So
Hmm.
I think that there should be. I mean, it's a global pandemic. It's not a local regional pandemic. So
Yep. Yep.
there has to be no barrier of entry for this.
All right. All right. The second question is like, what do you think about social media's banning people? Let's say like Donald Trump. What do you think about that?
I think
It's
it
a
was an
huh?
it was an extreme move. I think, well, firstly, he did extreme things.
Yeah, for
He
sure.
did incite people to, riot, and I was there. I was in Chicago at the time that happened,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I seen that firsthand how scary that environment was, and forcing people to come, as the president especially, to come out on the streets and start burning public property, start damaging things was never a good idea.
Hmm.
But yes, banning someone or kicking someone out from social media defeats the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, which calls for free speech. So, which also is a benchmark of democracy for all around the world. And I don't
Hmm.
mean to
Hmm.
say that the US is a superpower or anything, but yes, some of their ideals really make sense. Their ideals that public leaders are always held accountable and can always be questioned and can always be taken out of office.
Hmm.
That I think is a very strong democratic ideal that we need to follow. And getting someone out of social media for that was not a good idea. I mean, you can definitely ban individual posts. You can flag them as inappropriate. You can have
Hmm.
them reported and taken down. But kicking someone out, I don't think is a good idea.
Yeah, man. Like even Shopify did it for no reason. But yeah, like what are the few policies that let's say US or other countries that are taking up, which India should take up, so that we can ease the pandemic a bit?
Well, firstly, I think US has started rapid vaccination programs, which means that okay, I'll give you an example. In India, if
Hmm.
you want to get vaccinated, you have to show your Aadhaar card, you have to confirm your account details, your phone number, your name, where have you registered, you have a COVID report, you have a blah and blah and blah. It's a very
Hmm.
long process. But in the
Yep.
US, it's very simple. No matter who you are, you walk into a pharmacy, you sit down and fill a simple form which just has your name, phone number, when was the last time you had symptoms, sign on the sign below, maybe add your social security number and get yourself vaccinated. It is as simple as that. So if the process in between the system of vaccination and getting vaccinated could be easier, things can develop much faster. And I'm not going to talk about Canada because Canada is in a worse situation than us, just
Yeah.
that the
Yeah.
media doesn't cover it yet.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I mean, as far as the US goes, that could be much easier.
Yeah, man. I completely agree because in let's say UX, the thing is, if there is more time required for a person to sign up for an app, people usually drop off. That's why people like most of the apps introduced the sign up with Facebook or sign up with Google option. So that almost proves the theory that if you require more time to register for something, you'll not end up doing it, and that's pretty much the reason why
Absolutely.
people don't come up. Yeah. So coming back to the oxygen cans, so I'll ask the FAQs that I saw in your Instagram comments. Like a few were irrelevant, but
Right.
like I'll tell the most ones. So the first one is, how should I get the can?
Okay, so what I have done is I don't have any distributors right now, and I
Hmm.
kind of want to take a few seconds to explain why I don't have distributors, why I don't supply in bulk, because people tend to hoard it.
Hmm.
And that is something I'm completely against. That, I don't want people storing 200 cylinders, 200 cans in their backyard and not
Hmm.
actually giving it to people who need it. Because distributors usually tend to sell it to the customer that pays the most for it,
Yeah.
which
Huh.
is the worst kind of an idea you could do. I think that's war profiteering. I think it's a crime against humanity, and I think people deserve capital punishment for doing it. So
Hmm.
that's why I don't have distributors. That's why there is always a centralized process to whatever I build and sell. That it is controlled by one single person, and that is me. So if you
Hmm.
want to buy it, you send me a DM on Instagram or Facebook. I'm going to send you the Google form link. You fill up the link, then you get a confirmation SMS. I call you up and I verify that you really need it. It says yes, and then I ship it out. It's as simple as that. In many cases, I don't
Hmm.
even wait for the payment to come in because I know it's urgent. I honestly don't care if it comes in today, tomorrow, or even a week later or 10 days later. It's more important to send the can out, and that's what I do.
Today
Because I'm
I
able
agree
to
with you.
maintain that level of
Huh.
control with just
Huh. Huh. Huh.
me. I mean, I can understand it gets a little frustrating when I'm not able to respond immediately, but I think
Hmm.
it's the best way forward. It will ensure that I can really help people who really need it.
I absolutely agree with you in this case, but still, like, don't you think it's too manual for you to do it? Like, are you planning to build a website or something for this, or something a bit more
Yes,
automated?
yes, definitely. In fact, I'm as soon as I'm waiting for this crisis to relax a little,
Hmm.
and I will know this immediately. I can tell you straight away. I rely on data for this, and data
Hmm.
for me is God. When I say data, I'm getting more than 5,000 entries a day, so I can very easily map out which locations need it the most right now,
Hmm.
which locations has it declined, which locations has it increased, and what is the overall oxygen demand in the country. I'm getting to
Hmm.
know all of that by a simple formula on my Excel sheet. I don't need to ask surveyors. I don't need to watch the news. That's because I have raw data in my hand right now. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
relying on that. Once the data starts reducing, once the numbers start going down, it means that people are getting oxygen on
Huh,
time,
huh.
that the government is doing its job, that the infrastructure is up and ready to support. At that time, I'm going to hive it off. I'm going to give it to Amazon. I'm going to give it to Flipkart. I'm going to start setting up distributors in states, and I'm going to definitely put up a website where people can, put their entries and buy. The reason I don't do that now is because
Mm-hmm.
someone who really needs it might not get it because someone is trying to hoard it for their own personal gain.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure you know that remdesivir in the black market sells as 22,000 rupees a
Yep.
vial.
Mm-hmm.
A 10-liter cylinder sells at 45,000 rupees a cylinder, which is absurd. I mean, that is
True,
just,
true.
it is inhuman, unethical, and people deserve capital punishment for it. That's the only reason I don't
All
do
right.
this.
All right. All right. So another question a lot of people ask was like, there's a risk of oxygen poisoning. People say like, if there is really a risk, like how do you avoid that?
So, okay, so you have, I have to kind of dive a little bit into science for this, but okay.
Sure.
The thumb rule says that for anyone who's breathing in dry, pure oxygen, which is not passing through a water tube for more than 24 hours continuously,
Mm-hmm.
will have a reduction of CO2 levels in their body, and their lungs will start laboring, which they will go into lung damage and body fatigue, and they will go unconscious, which
Mm-hmm.
is usually irreversible and irreparable. So it
Hmm.
is never, no patient is ever administered pure dry oxygen, 99% oxygen continuously for more than 24 hours.
Hmm. Hmm.
And to keep a 400% safety margin on it, the thumb rule says not more than 6 hours.
Hmm.
So 6 hours at a stretch, no one is given dry oxygen. Even if oxygen is administered, it is administered at a lower pressure
Hmm.
and passed through a water tube. So it's moisturized oxygen, which means the water enters your lungs as well. It's able to retain and it's able to generate enough carbon dioxide so that the CO2 level doesn't drop down.
Hmm.
In this entire process, you have something called FiO2, which is called fraction of uninspired oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, fraction of uninspired oxygen is the fraction of oxygen that is wasted in a breath.
Huh.
That basically you don't take, that the kind of percentage you don't take. With
Hmm.
99% pure O2, that fraction improves. So if you're
Hmm.
taking just 3 inhalations every hour, your saturation is going to improve, but it's not going to affect your carbon dioxide levels.
Hmm.
So it's going to have zero effect on the way your lungs are pumping, whether it's helping this or helping that. To give you an example, if you eat maybe one donut once in a week, it's not going to help you gain weight.
Hmm.
It's not going to give you. For example, if you drink one beer once a week or twice a week, it's not going to give you a beer belly.
Hmm.
But yes, of course, if you drink a beer constantly for 3-4 days at a stretch, at the end of the week you will feel sluggish, you will feel bloatish,
Hmm.
and that's the same concept here as well. So that's why I did not build a pressure regulator on top, which would give you continuous supply, because that's unhealthy for the body. That's why we have a press to breathe kind of a system where where you
Yeah.
can stop the oxygen when you don't need it.
All right. All right. The other question was like, what is the cost of this can?
So it's 1,500 for 2 cans. The MRP is 1,500, but it's too steep a price. I realized people who can't afford it can't pay for it, so I
Hmm.
dropped the price down to half. And I of course have people giving me donations, and said keep these cans aside and give it to for free for whoever needs it. So I've got a stock of cans for those kind of people as well, for people who can't really afford it, and I've been doing that kind of work as well.
All right. All right. So there's another comment. I'm not sure how relevant this is, but Venkat says, and I quote, the math doesn't add up. 500 ml of oxygen and 400 puffs per bottle is close to 200 liter of oxygen. The bottle is close to 1 liter, give or take, which means you have 200 atmospheric pressure, which is 3000 psi. Your bottle will explode at 300 psi. What do you want to say about it?
Yes, that's that's where the concept of trade secret comes in.
Mhm.
The reason my product is successful because I'm able to find the right balance between volume, temperature, and pressure.
Mhm.
And it took more than 4 months to get to that right exact value, which gives me 400 inhalations. It gives me the oxygen at a particular pressure and the temperature, and that's the reason why the product works. Of course, yes. As far as the science that he has quoted goes, that is 100% correct. That
Mhm.
with the kind of pressure that I'm inputting the gas in at 3,000 psi or 3,000 atmosphere, this the can is going to burst. That is absolutely correct. but my can is not made of aluminum. That's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
And my can doesn't have oxygen at overtly high temperatures. And
Mm-hmm.
thirdly, the pressure that I have is the most optimum for a can to, give 400 inhalations. That's the reason I'm able to do this.
All right, perfect. I don't have any questions. So, at an ending note, what do you want to say to the listeners?
I mean,
A message to the people listening.
firstly,
Yeah.
if I'm sure your listeners are mostly a bunch of young people, and to them, I would my salute to all of you. Honestly, I don't know how else I can congratulate you all for the kind of work you're doing. You guys are doing some insane stuff, stuff I haven't seen in my lifetime. And I've seen crisis. I've been a part of the Mumbai floods. I was, part of the rescue team of the Chennai floods as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I was part of many, many other forest fires, and I've done all of that rescue work. But honestly, looking at the kind of resourceful output that the youth of this country is providing now, I can feel so proud to say that I come from India, that I'm part of this generation where people know how to get things done despite there being roadblocks, which is
Hmm.
insanely
Hmm.
amazing. So firstly, congratulations to all of you. Thank you to all of you for doing this, for helping people when there is no hope, in a time where people are anxious about this, keeping your own safety aside and thinking about the community first. And that's what I personally appreciate the most, is when someone thinks of the greater good above themselves, someone puts the bigger picture in front of them. I think that is more important than anything else. And lastly, stop falling prey to your politicians, to the gimmicks that people play, to the propaganda that your news channels run. Stop
Hmm.
falling prey to all of that.
Hmm.
Stop falling prey to hatred. Start developing more trust and faith in yourself, in your fellow countrymen, and everyone around you. And I think we are headed for a very bright future the way we are going.
Thank you so much, man, for your time. And everything about the can will be mentioned in the description down below. You can check it if you need. Yeah, thanks for listening to the podcast so far. We'll meet you in the next
Perfect,
time.
Yash. Thank you so much. This was amazing. Thank you so much.